Oh, hello. My name is Michael J. Love, and welcome to a special episode of Thoughts That Move. In this episode, I will be leading three fellow artists, Alisa Guardiola, Ginnifer Joe, and Karissa Royster, through a conversation on all things rhythm tap dance. We'll discuss our role as educators, dance makers, and keepers of tap dance's rich legacy as a Black American art form. To get started, I'll tell you a little bit about each of these guests and how you can learn more and support them. Alisa Guardiola is an interdisciplinary artist from Austin, Texas. She is a current member of San Francisco's La Mezcla, a polyrhythmic, multiform ensemble with work rooted in Chicanx, Latinx history, indigenous traditions, and social justice, directed by Vanessa Sanchez. Alisa has danced as a principal with Tapestry Dance Company and as a soloist with 8-9 Dance Company, Salt Dance Company, and Backhouse Dance Company. She holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Dance Performance from Chapman University, where she was the recipient of multiple choreography awards, performance awards, and the Phoenix Award for her work in redesigning her artistic identity following injury. Her passion for dance comes from the belief that connection is a vital component to the human experience, that of which can be nurtured and developed through movement and rhythm. Ginnifer Joe is a multi-form dance artist with a BFA in dance from the University of Texas at Austin. She primarily works in tap, contemporary, house, and hip-hop, and she is currently a dance artist with Arcos and Tapestry Dance Company in Austin, Texas. She has worked with numerous choreographers, including Charles O. Anderson, Erica Gianfrido, Dorothy Overby, Andrea Beckham, Rennie Harris, Sidra Bell, Raphael Xavier, Acia Gray, Q Lon Q Arnold, Jen Freeman, Michael J. Love, Siobhan Alexis, Jeremy Arnold, Matt Shields, and Nicholas Van Young. Karissa Royster is a performer, choreographer, and educator specializing in tap dance. Originally from San Antonio, Karissa is a graduate of NYU, where she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in history and was a Jackie Robinson Foundation Scholar. Her formation as an artist and practitioner began under the tutelage of Barbara Phillips and Third Coast Rhythm Project. Karissa performed at the 70th Annual Tony Awards with the company of Shuffle Along, nominated for Best Musical and Best Choreography, as well as on ABC's broadcast of Taking the Stage, Changing America. Karissa teaches workshops at various institutions across the United States and is passionate about preserving and sharing the beautiful tradition of tap dance, as well as exploring its roots in American history and vernacular music. Ginnifer, you were sort of mentioning how later in life you can really like sit with the fact that like a lot of your first teachers were like white teachers, and you as an adult you've had to sort of sit down with that and be like, okay, like this is the information that I got, and I need to erase some of this and hang on to some things, and or just like further beef up on some other knowledge that like is clearly important.
I can expand. We had one main tap teacher, and she was also like the director of all of the other forms for the company. At like that young age, like the studio company. And I'm questioning like the codification of tap dance. I'm questioning what are the actual roots, because I was not taught the history. I was just taught steps and the names of the steps and not where they came from or who called it that. From my young experience, most do not have like a college degree or have studied much of like dance history. And that was my experience growing up, is that's like who I was surrounded by. And I'm questioning a lot of how dance information and education is just passed down. And then a lot of times people who step into these roles are ill-equipped.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, many times, oftentimes. And I don't necessarily feel like that was my situation with tap dance, because I feel like I have like a solid foundation of like technique and steps, but I have zero history. And I have like zero knowledge of where that came from. And it feels like, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of whitewashing in a way. It's like all these teachers that I've had were predominantly white, passing down this art form without giving credit to where it was due.
As an adult now, and like where I'm at in my dance journey, I'm really grateful that I had both experiences of like being in this competitive studio and then like being super lucky to have someone like Barbara Phillips there, because like just the nature of being on a competition team, like you do learn how to dance in an ensemble, you do learn like basic performance skills and whatnot, picking up choreography that I feel like like that part of my journey greatly helped me later on when I was like working with Savion, you know? So I'm like really grateful for that experience, but I'm really grateful that I had Barbara, because like, it was like once I took class from her, I was like, wait a second, this is like a whole other jam over here. We're not just like doing toe heels and wings for the sake of like drilling, you know, like we're saying something with this technique we have. I feel like she gave me so much in terms of making me understand that like my journey in this dance is an individual one, and like to explore, and that there's like not necessarily one right way to go about things, and like anything she couldn't provide me with, whatever that was, she always led me to the next door or like the next person or whatever, that I feel like helped me figure out the history, whatever we know of it, or like figure out um, like what it means for me as like a Black and Asian woman to be doing this dance. I recognize that I was like lucky in that I even had access to being in a studio, and that my mom could like pay for that education. And then two, that I just like happened to have a teacher who was like leading me in the right directions in this art form that I didn't really know a lot about, and that other people around in the dance world did not really know about, you know? So yeah, my little spiel on that.
I think it's interesting, and it's always like a finicky line in terms of like one studio being able to provide every aspect of an education for a single individual. And I understand that studios are a business, and I want every business to thrive. If you're a business owner, I want your business to thrive. I understand also the like positive effect that like consistent training can do, which one studio can own. So I'm a fan. But that being said, sometimes being in a studio, like this one size fits all, like how do we create an environment where we nourish children's talents if they're showing talent for tap? And then how do we also nourish people in tap dance if they're maybe more excited about another art form? Because something, Ginnifer, that you brought up, and Karissa, both of you, I think, have mentioned this now, of being raised. What I'm hearing from you is like, this has sort of been in our lives. And it wasn't until I grew older that I realized that I had another language that I could speak, that maybe other students that grew up in studios that didn't offer as equitable as an opportunity in tap dance as mine did. I could express myself in ways that they couldn't. And I had more access to those languages that I suddenly felt really grateful for.
How do you make sure that your students are getting what they need and you're keeping them entertained and engaged, and you're also making sure that they're learning the history and like that they know what's happening in terms of contemporary uses of the form as well?
I know I said I've only just now started, except that I'm like a tap dancer for life, but I have been a lot more confident in my purpose as like a tap educator, and like passing down just like where I'm at in my experience and what I've gained so far in my journey. And I think that's because I just had really incredible teachers. And I will also credit like actually working in a school has helped me, because I find that so much of it is just like, it's like meeting kids where they're at and like seeing what they need, and like it just kind of comes out from there. I feel like this last city, I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was in Denver, and like those last two cities, I was like feeling good about what I was doing, but it was also like affirming, because the kids were like, that's like the first tap class I've enjoyed in a really long time. Like I had a really good time. And I think it was successful because I was like, I didn't walk in, like I had an idea of what I wanted to give them, but I didn't walk in being like, this is my agenda for these kids. I kind of like have walked in and like seen the room and been like, okay, what do these kids need right now? Like they're not even meeting me on the wavelength of like, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. And like, this is where these shuffle ball changes fit into this. You know what I mean? So the conversation starts there. And then like I noticed that like the history just kind of comes out where it needs to. Like I was up here talking about the plantation and like the US banning, you know, drums in Denver, but that's because the kids, I could see that the kids could meet me there, because I was talking about like communication and like we're not just making sounds, like this is a sentence you're making and there's punctuation and space and all these things, and like they were just ready for that. So I don't know, I think I say all that stuff to say, like, I think like it sounds corny, but the more I learn about like life, the more I'm informed about tap dance and vice versa. I feel like this dance has taught me about life, and through that, it's just like helping me connect with people more. And like through those connections, I'm able to like drop in those little nuggets that like kind of keep them a little bit interested for the next time, you know? So that's just what I'm noticing, and I'm really enjoying it. And I was a little skeptical at first about teaching tap in conventions, just because culturally that's not where they're at, you know? But I think it's going well so far, and like hopefully some of these kids will, like, their interest is piqued in some way. And that's all I can hope for, I guess.
Yeah, I think I've been challenging myself to be more realistic about like my goals. And sometimes it's not even that they're doing the dance that I leave with them well. It's that they have enough that they know how to like practice and get better at it on their own. And then also like what you just said, Karissa, of like leaving morsels so that they're interested and like they'll chase more knowledge on their own. I would love for us to like transition to talking about what we see happening and like what's exciting to us and like what we would like to see more of.
As a kid, as I started to focus more on tap and love tap and wanted to do tap, I was always told like you have to make the opportunities. Like the opportunities are not out there. You need to make them happen for yourself. But like I also grew up seeing like Tapestry and like seeing like a company that was like happening, you know what I mean? So like that didn't always resonate, and I was really lucky that, you know, while I was still in college, this show happened that I was like lucky enough to get into. So it's like, you know,
you should name what that you should name what that was.
The Longest Name Ever, Shuffle Along, or The Making of the Musical Sensation of 1921, and all that followed. But that was happening while I was in college. So it was like, now as an adult, post-college, I think what I'm seeing more of is like this group of people, like the people who went to school doing their thing, like Michael, what you're doing at Princeton, you know, it's like, and you're like, how come a tap dancer hasn't like done this before? I think what I'm seeing is like more tap dancers and like more tap dancers who have these other skills and are college educated, like breaking ground in places that we haven't historically seen ourselves in, but that like are welcoming us. I think that's really exciting, and it does fall in line with what I was told, which is that like you have to make the spaces for yourself, you know. Like I wish that they existed already, but I think it's also coming to terms with like tap dance in a contemporary setting, and that like we're in the new age kind of with this art form, whereas for like an art form like ballet that has been codified for so long, and like maybe the history's not as weird and complex and ambiguous, you know, like that's just where we're at in development of this art form, and I think it's exciting. Of course there are cons to that, but like I want to big up that and you, Michael, and just the both of you for like breaking that ground, because it's allowing space for other dancers to come.
I think what you're bringing up is what I am most interested in, and it's something that I've brought up when we're all speaking before, in terms of how do we allow tap dancing as an art form and its future to allow room and space for multiple identities and still consider that person a tap artist. You don't have to only care about tap in order for me to think that you're a great tap artist. And that's something that I think like was a little bit of a ceiling when I was being educated. And that's my own personal experience of a lot of gatekeepers of you don't count as a tap dancer unless you XYZ. And that was happening when I was in like, you know, Austin tap dance workshops. That was happening in workshops when I was traveling and whatnot. Like you don't count unless you've done this with your tap skill set, with your tap knowledge. I want to value that, but I also want to say, come as you are and combine your tap training with something else. I want to see more things than the gatekeepers originally made me aware of.
Going off of that, I am seeing an expanding desire for interdisciplinary artists, especially in dance, where it's like more forms are welcome in the same show. And then I am also thinking about this past year and how our industry is just at a flat line right now. So yeah, I feel like we're at ground zero to make whatever we want possible. That's what I'm seeing, and I do hope that we just like take the reins, take the opportunity, and like run with it.
I would say there's definitely a culture shift that has happened and is happening and is about to happen again. And I think it's like a generational culture shift. I think we're also in this moment where a lot of institutions and people connected to institutions are starting to have to pay attention to things that they weren't necessarily paying attention to before. And so I think a lot of opportunities are like coming up for people who they historically have not been coming up for. And so I'm interested to continue to watch how a lot of these sorts of like things play out, like culturally and just in terms of like the infrastructure of like funding and who's getting attention and like what artists are being looked to as like the new voices for like what reasons.
What I will bring up is I'm applying for law school. And in order to apply for law school, you need letters of recommendations from professors. I'm lucky because in dance schools, and my particular school is a really small school. So I called up the dean of the performing arts. And we had a Zoom meeting recently. And the first thing that he said to me is, he was like, you know what? When you were in school, we just assumed that you would assimilate. We never ever spoke about the fact that you were a person of color at an entirely, traditionally, historically white school.
Where did you go to school again?
I went to Chapman University
Okay.
in Southern California. It's in Orange County. I'm saying all that to just bring up the point of like what you're bringing up, Michael, in terms of how institutions are being forced to shift, how institutions are looking at things maybe a little bit differently. And I actually experienced a pretty well-rounded education in my childhood studio environment and actually experienced like a more white-lensed, smaller-sided education in my undergraduate degree, which is kind of just bizarre. So I don't have much more to say about that, but I think it's interesting, where it's showing up and how it can show up. You think that you're going to a higher education and it could be limited as well.
You're bringing up the reality of like, once you cross over into the professional world, like most of these institutions are still predominantly white led, especially working in Broadway. The conversations that are happening right now in terms of, we call this thing the Great White Way, people. Like, how called the Great White Way? Like, for how long? And I've always been like, we're seeing what could be an attempt at a really big shift, but actually might not be. And so I think as a professional artist, and as artists in genres that have like largely been underrepresented, it's like we're TBD on the state of affairs, right? Because I don't know, it's really hard. It's like you're still, when you get into the real world, you're still fighting like white supremacy in institutions. And, I don't know, I just see it all the time in Broadway. You see it like even in these training programs over the summer. You see it in tap festivals, quite frankly, like the majority of tap festivals and like who runs them. And and that's just like what it is. So I definitely think you're bringing up a salient conversation.
Even in tap festival context, just my own experience with Tapestry and like why I decided to leave, because it just became glaringly obvious that like there was no time or energy put towards thinking about how identity played into like where the form was today, and especially at a company or like at an dare I say institution. I think culturally, like tapestry has been around for like 30 plus years at this point. Especially where people were like making their living off of this form, and it was obvious that the people who were making their living off of this form had not thought about, oh, like as a white person, like what does it mean for me to like position myself as a voice of authority, you know? And I just like couldn't be in an environment where that was like not being addressed, or like even like where attempts weren't being made at the time. And so I think that like shifts are happening, and people are making the call for shifts to happen, but then it's like, you know, I mean, what does it mean when you have a TAF festival and everyone and the producer director is someone who is white, and then like all the faculty is white? Like, what is that like? Like what? I don't know. That to me, that seems crazy. That like seems crazy, and it seems like a glaring issue.
I think for me, it just brings me back to like everyone does this dance for such different reasons. And for some people, like they do this dance because they've like made a lot of money off of it. For some people, they do this because it's like, it's strictly about dance and music and has nothing to do with their identity. For some people, it's like more deeply embedded than that, you know? So I don't know, that's just like what it brings me back to. And I think in like, I mean, people might want to burn me at the stake for being like, we're still a blossoming art form, because like I'm fully aware it's been around for a long time, folks. But I just think in terms of like how it's solidified institutionally, or like what access is like, we are still blossoming. And so like in that phase, like, yeah, it just gets complicated as people are in it for different reasons. And so in that blossoming phase, it's so delicate when like the gatekeepers have that much power in a blossoming art form, if that makes any sense. Something that I feel like I'm pushing up against right now in my professional career is like, okay, like where do I want to be? What spaces do I want to be? What spaces do I want to support? What spaces do I want to build? Where do I want to lend my services to? Because like there's people over here doing it for these reasons, and like, okay, but like I want to be over here. And yeah, it's tricky business. I don't know. I'm figuring it out myself.
Both of you are, you know, bring up points that I have felt myself in terms of people not wanting to have even this sort of conversation. And and I really can only speak for myself with being in these rooms with maybe gatekeepers, or maybe being in a workshop for the art form of tap dance specifically, and seeing like a Q&A panel where every single person in front of me is white, and they're holding a sort of stance of like grip, for lack of a better word. It's not
they're yes.
It's not a graceful way to talk about what I sense in the room from them. And I have mentioned it before, of like a grip of, this is how I've made my career, this is how I've made my life. And if you don't do it that way, then you don't count, or you haven't earned your respect. It's not about what you've achieved or not, but it's the length of time that one spends learning and researching an art form would suffice for ability to have a conversation. Brought this up before, but it's still in my mind. It's just like living in my head rent free, about seeing people on maybe like internet, like social media avenues like Reddit or Twitter, being like posting videos of white tap artists from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and like saying like tap dance is such a lost art, like it's such a lost art. And I see that way too much. I don't know why that's happening. There's plenty of tap artists, like we're very much here and alive. Dormisha is out there, like like Karissa is out there, Michael J. Love is out there, like it's, so I guess I get confused on why that's happening so much.
Having a lot of thoughts. And yeah, I've got a lot to say. And before I do, I want to credit like all of the following questions that are coming up for me are from like education from Sonia Renee Taylor, Charles O. Anderson, Adrienne Marie Brown, and other like Black and Indigenous educators and friends that are in my circle. When we're talking about like institutions, predominantly white institutions, I'm thinking about money and like authority and who has predominantly had access to those spaces. So it only makes sense that since we live in this white supremacist sea, myth of a sea, that we would find just everything. Yeah, I'm thinking top down also. So like once it reaches the top, it's then whitewashed and then passed down in their own language, and has completely like obliterated the authenticity of the original thing. My next question about this shift, this culture shift that we're experiencing, is what are the hoops that we're going to have to still jump through to reach that funding? Mm-hmm. What's the process that is still very much like curated and defined, and like this structure that we have to like navigate through to just do the thing that like we are meant to do? And that is like highly, like the only people who know how to like switch their language and like, or yeah, it's code switching for many BIPOC. And that's something that Mario Ramirez has talked a lot about, where it's like because they went to a predominantly white institution, they understand how to code switch through applications so that they get the money to do the thing that they actually want to do that like doesn't involve them at all, but we just need funding.
It seems to me that there are folks who are like very ready to have those conversations, and maybe some folks who know that they should happen and are ready to like do the work to be ready to have them. And then there are also folks who like are trying to avoid them and pretend like they don't need to be had.
It comes down to like a life philosophical situation. Like, I don't know, back to the thing of like TAP is life, because for me, I think identity is totally like, I believe identity is totally like important when it comes to this dance, and just like where it comes from, like how I practice it, all of these things. So like if someone's not ready to talk about their identity in real life, you know, it's like I can't even expect them to have this conversation when it comes to this dance, you know, like it's just such a larger like life conversation, you know, that I don't know, again, like I don't know what to solve there, you know, but it's just like it's complicated, especially with an art form that exists so much in like social identities in this country, you know, and like the like codifying race in this country, and like, you know, and yeah, I don't know, I guess going back to history, like it just goes back to the history talk, which again, some people are still not ready to have. Some people are not ready to learn American history as adults. And so like if they can't even meet you there, it's like we can't have a deep conversation about this dance. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's like what I'm thinking about and mulling over with people. And it does like shape my interactions with people in this dance, just kind of like, okay, like we're not ready to talk about that thing, so we can probably only get so far on this other thing. You know what I mean?
There's a certain sort of like Black affect that people might take on, whether or not they realize that they're doing it because they're emulating the people that they look up to or that they've identified for themselves, that like that so-and-so is doing real tap dance versus like tap dance that is not real. And so there's all these sorts of, we're getting to performance studies. There's a way of performing. I think this is happening less so. Like, I think this space of like, who is a tap dancer is being like opened up, just because I think, again, it's like this generational shift of like I know everyone in my generation, like we're all adults now. And so we're just kind of like doing the thing maybe. And like, there's generations behind us that are like doing the thing and like more, and like, you know, Gen Z are folks who have like grown up with the language that like millennials like started using. Like I'll make that claim. And so like I think Gen Z is like more ready just generally to like be like, no, like we're not gonna accept that, and da-da-da, and I'm gonna break it down for you, and like you won't have a choice but to like confront it.
What you're talking about though is very on brand for what the art form is. You still get white folks who don't realize that they're trying to imitate Black people by like, you know, I like what you're talking about is like going on stage and like all of a sudden the swag's a little different or you talk a little different or whatever it is, you know. So I'm right there with you in that, like where I'm at right now is like I'm interested in people who have like recognized that and are ready to like take that conversation somewhere else and like allow tap to live in this contemporary space beyond like that trope of those performance tropes that you speak of that are done very much like subconsciously.
The point that you are both bringing up, Karissa and Michael, about this subconscious adoption of mannerisms and like a racial borrowing in order to look more like a real tap dancer. All of that is necessary for that to fall away, I think, in order for tap to survive. I want them to absolutely own themselves, their own identity, their own mannerisms, their own rhythms with respect to where it comes from.
Yeah. Like I think that's the piece that's biggest. I think like Karissa, I think you talked about it being like a personal journey. And it's interesting that we're all like, as an adult, it's like so much easier. And I think, I forget who said it to me, but I think someone told me like when I was young, like, you're not going to be a good tap dancer until you're like in your 40s or 50s. So it's like, I think the understanding is that you get better over time, which is like the opposite of like, you know, a ballet dancer's career. It's like you dance until you're 23 and then you like are old and crippled and you don't dance anymore. Right. But I think it's like, I think I'm interested in discovering, like being able to like articulate a name, being able to like recognize like, oh, like, why am I approaching this in a certain way? Is it like something that's like, I'm accessing some like lineage that like exists in an embodied way because of like what I've learned or who I have studied with, or like who I'm trying to emulate or who I'm trying to like honor. Is this like me in this moment? Is this something else? Like, and is that okay for it to be something else or someone else? And like, what does it mean for like me to move in a way and like make rhythms in a way that is me? And like, why is that me? Like, I think like developing an identity for myself as a dancer is like really what I'm trying to say. And I think that's important. And I think it's important for any tap dancer to be able to like know that, and be able to tap in and out of that and to like be aware of that. Do you understand where you're coming from? And do you understand like why it is that you're showing up in this way in the space in real time? And like, can you like name that and talk about that? Can you name like what your presence in certain spaces does and like what consequences that has? And like, and can you name all these things and like still go to the next level of saying like how to show up in spaces and how to like add to spaces? And like, I don't know, there's all these like negotiations that you're like, but it's like, do you know, and can you like demonstrate to the folks around you that like you are able to like take care of the culture and like honor it and like add to it in ways that like care for it? I think maybe that's all theoretical, but I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. I think that that's like, when I think of a good tap dancer, I think that that's what I think about.
Again, my philosophy is that tap dance is so much about the individual and like their journey. And so I just like agree with you. And like to add on to what you said about like the white kid in Minnesota, it just reminds me of this conversation we had during rehearsal of Shuffle Along about Amy Winehouse. And like we were having this conversation about cultural appropriation and like Amy Winehouse and whatever. And I won't say who was trying to call out Amy Winehouse for stealing from like Donny Hathaway and all these other people. But like, I thought what was interesting was like George C. Wolf was like, he was like, that's not cultural appropriation to me because like Amy Winehouse knows the lineage of what she does and where it comes from. She pays credit to who inspired her. And like the way she sings is so authentic to her. Like, you know, that's just her. She's not trying to be anyone else. That's just her voice. And like how all this information she's taking in, that's like how it's manifesting from her. And so, yeah, that point you brought up is just like, it brings me back to this conversation about like, who is this historically Black art form for? And for me, it's like what you're saying, it's about someone who can reckon with the history, takes the time to understand the history, but also like has a genuine, authentic like self journey in this and like takes that on. And I agree with like Alisa, you totally embody that. So yeah.
That was such a great story too, Karissa, and the points that you bring up of somebody synthesizing all of the information and then producing what that means to them.
Yeah.
That to me is exciting.
And it's messy and it's not like complete and it's like always changing. Yeah, sorry, Karissa.
No, I was just gonna say, and like the product of that is like you hear Amy Winehouse and you know it's her. Like she is so uniquely, she has such a unique voice, even though she's like borrowed from here. And you know what I mean? Like, although you can clearly see where the lineage is, it still produced a completely unique individual artist, you know? And so I think that's what I've always appreciated about tap dance is like, yeah, there's this like common ground through which like we all come from and that we reckon with, but like even with like that challenge scene in tap, it's like it's always been about the individual that's produced from this like common soil, you know?
I have like 3 words that are coming up for me: reverence, responsibility, and accountability. And how most students know how to do that in ballet, and how like it will look wildly different in a different cultural art form. And ballet is also a cultural art form, and we need to recognize it as such, that like that is a different culture that we're living in when we're in that class. And it's important to be able to know that we're stepping into another culture in a different dance form, and like how do we pay reverence, respect, and like take accountability when we're in that form as well. Those are thoughts that are coming up for me.
I'm still figuring it out and I'm still like, wait, what is my voice? And I feel more sure about it than I ever have before, but I'm still like, this could use like 25 more years, you know what I mean? But I also think that like, as tap dancers, a lot of times we think that our voice needs to manifest that voice through improvisation. There's another spiritual level to this in terms of like expressing yourself. And that can look like a lot of very different things. And so I feel like I'm still like trying to figure out what that means to me. And I'm finding it more through teaching and choreographing lately, but like, I don't know. That's just like how my voice seems to manifest these days. And I'm still figuring out what that is. And it's changed over the last couple of years. It's like, there are styles that I was like, that ain't for me. That now I'm like, okay, like I can see that, you know?
I think it switched whenever I realized I had agency over like who I am and what I'm doing day to day and like making daily decision. And Bell Hooks is all about love. She has like a chapter about children's rights. And it's like, if we actually gave children rights inside of family units, like, wow, what a difference that would make. So that's just another thought that I'm having with like, well, we don't even give them agency. We don't even give them a choice. And like, I was never given a choice until I was 18. So that's my tangent.
I would really like to see more companies. Like, I would like to direct a company of my own, and I would like to provide dancers with like a salary, health insurance, wellness, like structured wellness. And I would like to be able to be in a position to like make dents in like institutional ways, like bring some of my heroes into like certain institutions and like have them be like guests of like honor at like certain events. I would love to like see like tap dance like on a certain like platform of like respect, and like specifically see like Black artists like at the forefront of that, and like Black women and like Black queer folks at the forefront of that, and to like set up a way so that like folks can like do this art form and like have these type of discussions like regularly, and like be able to like live comfortably. I like would like to make a way for like other folks to like have the experience of like doing this at like a very high level and like having the space and the resources to like be in the studio for like long amounts of time and like take other people in the studio with them and like develop and like experiment and like, and also like at the same time like protect all the work that like we are carrying, and to be able to like, this may sound frou-frou or maybe it's not, but like I think that like we're carrying a lot because like we have to, because like we don't want it to get lost. And so like I wonder what it might feel like for all of us if like we're finally able to be like, we can like put it down and like know that it can be like kept safe somewhere, and like people will be able to like get to it and like pick it up for a little bit, but like also like put it down like in a centralized place. I don't know if it should be in a centralized place. I don't know if that's like a conversation, but I'm saying like I just like want to like set up some sort of like way for that to happen. And also like I would like to like, you know, like have my own salary that like would allow me to like have a life of like, you know, like, take care of my parents, like, you know, like have a dog, like, you know, be able to like live to be able to live and not have to be like survival mode at all times.
I'm really tired of dancers having to worry about like how to eat and like how to watch their contracts at the same time that they're trying to worry about how to be dancers. And that's when I just was like looking around and was like, oh, I'll just do it. And so I want to be like, I would love it if these tap dance companies like hired me. Like I want to be the person that dancers call and say like, hey, can you look over this for me? Because I want dancers and artists to do their art and to have so much abundance within that. And I want to see tap dance everywhere. I want it more places because there's so many people that are gifted and that have the gift, but there's not time to develop it, or they're tired, or they have like 5 other jobs and they don't have time to dedicate to like a show, like a standing show in a cafe, like every Friday night. I want my children to go see it. Like I want us to like every Friday night we're like, oh yeah, like we go and visit this tap dancer at this cafe, or we see these tap dancers on tour. We see these tap dancers in their own films, their own movies. Like I would love it to be more abundant. And I personally feel that it's not more abundant because dancers, in my experience, are like trying to hold on to like so many different hats. So that's why I'm going and getting the hat that I'm getting so I can create more art in my life, if that makes sense. I'm like, all right, you guys need help. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna come help you guys out. So I would love for every dance company to supply dancers and artists with their own lawyer, with someone that they can call that's completely advocating for only them, so that they're not scared or worried all the time. And also the inclusivity of thinking, oh, that lady is not just like an old lawyer, like, oh, like that lady is like also a tap artist as well. And like allowing that sort of inclusivity. So that's my hope for myself in tap.
I want more options. I want those who like love tap and have interest in like curating Vail Dance Festival to be able to do that. I want tap dancers to like have options when it comes to representing tap on TV. I don't want them to have to wait 20 years for the next like rhythm tap Broadway show, which is like this, like our version of Shuffle Along happened literally 20 years after Noise Funk, you know? I want more options for everyone and like all the different facets of like loving tap dance and not just in performance. And yeah, so I'm on the same page.
My dream is all of y'all's dream. I'm on board. I'm here to support it. I am like, what is it? Like given, I'm at your whatever disposal to support these dreams. Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note, I will say thank y'all for doing this. This was, I think this is special that we are able to have this conversation, and I'm interested in having more conversations like this. So, yes, I will figure out how that can happen and be in touch. But like, thank you for being so open and sharing and like giving of your time and energy. Yeah, and this has been wonderful.